Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to follow the Honourable Member for Paisley and Renfrewshire North, and I welcome his support for this bill. I'd just like to start by congratulating the Minister on his appointment to this important role and for his contribution this afternoon in explaining so clearly the objectives of this necessary bill. Like many in the House, I welcome the objectives of this bill to update the legislative framework for control of civilian UK airspace. Through modernisation of airspace, we can reduce carbon emissions from aviation, reduce the impact of flight paths, and tackle misuse of unmanned aircraft like drones. It's particularly fitting that after some years of delay, largely through the intervention of a general election in 2019, this bill is being brought to the House on the very day that Professor Sapatha Dasgupta publishes his seminal review on the economics of biodiversity. Aviation plays a vital part in our economy, but it is crucial that we find a way to reduce its environmental impact. So while this is not the primary purpose of the bill, in my view, it is a necessary and fundamental ancillary benefit. Inefficient flight paths set some decades ago will lead to longer travel times for passengers and freight traffic, and therefore greater CO2 emissions from flights. So airspace modernisation, if robust, can play a part in helping the UK meet our net zero obligations by 2050. So I'd like to use my brief contribution today to highlight the potential impact of flight paths over those parts of our landmass which have a special place in nature, designated as areas of special significance, including national parks, AONBs and SSSIs. These are areas that we as a nation have designated of sufficient importance as to warrant additional protection. And it seems to me that when the impact of noise pollution is well known, that we should ensure these areas continue to be protected as much as possible through any changes in flight paths. I'd like to place on record my thanks to my noble friend in the other place, Lord Randall of Uxbridge, for tabling an amendment to this bill which would have precluded aircraft from flying below 7,000 feet over areas of outstanding natural beauty, except for the purposes of safety or landing and takeoff from airports and airfields. 7,000 feet being the point at which noise is considered by the Civil Aviation Authority to be a pertinent consideration when designing flight paths. While he didn't press the amendment to a division, he did refer to the debate on the 22nd of January in the other place to some written questions that I had asked of the then Minister, my honourable friend, the member for Rochester and Strood, and I'd like briefly to comment on her responses. So I'm aware that existing air navigation guidance does suggest that where practicable, it is desirable, and this is a quote from the guidance, that airspace routes below 7,000 feet should seek to avoid flying over areas of outstanding natural beauty and national parks. This is welcome so far as it goes, but it frankly does not go very far, and I know many people would like to see this limit raised to a higher threshold. Even at the existing height restriction, there appears to be almost nothing in the way of sanction should this advice be ignored. I recognise that it will not be possible for flights to avoid all AONBs and national parks. Gatwick is surrounded by them, for example. But I would like further reassurance from the Minister about the redress or sanctions available should civilian aircraft fly lower than they should. There may be a tool at hand to help him. I warmly welcome the establishment in 2019 of the Independent Commission on Civil Aviation Noise under the leadership of the Head Commissioner, Rob Light, to provide some transparent and independent advice within the aircraft noise debate. And while it's clearly early days, the ambitions of ICANN are welcome. In the foreword to his first corporate strategy, Mr. Light said, welcome action is being taken by the UK government, the aviation industry and others to address climate change and reduce carbon emissions. I believe that aviation noise must also be considered by the industry and government as a major issue alongside climate change. I agree with him. Given we're proposing changing flight paths, it is prudent for us to have robust information about how noise will impact the public and the natural world we're trying to protect on the ground. While not interfering with this independence, I would urge the Minister to ensure that ICANN's remit includes engaging not only with communities adjacent to airports, airfields and their flight paths, but also those responsible for managing our designated landscapes, national parks and AONBs, and wider areas likely to be impacted adversely by noise. I've been contacted by a number of constituents over the past couple of years complaining of increased civilian air traffic. They live within the Shropshire Hills AONB, which covers some 300 square miles, half of my constituency of Ludlow. They've seen, and in some cases recorded, an increase in flight numbers, in particularly during the summer of 2019, so prior to the pandemic, when clearly flight numbers will have declined. But they found it very difficult to secure information as to the cause of the increase, details of aircraft movements at different heights, or what could be done about it. And given this challenge, with exemptions from freedom of information requests for several civil aviation bodies, I would also urge the Minister to consider whether application of FOI exemptions in this area remain appropriate for the sake of greater transparency of the public. Turning briefly to part 3 of the bill, I also welcome the measures concerning unmanned aircraft and drones. It is clear that this nascent but rapidly growing industry has a strong future with huge applications from which we will all derive significant benefit. But I'm particularly interested to see how, for example, drones are already being used to monitor environmental change and the impact of pollution. But we've already seen the ability of drones to disrupt people's lives, including very notably the incident at Gatwick Airport in 2018, when over 1,000 flights were impacted by a drone sighting close to the runway. So we must consider carefully how we can maintain public safety from malicious actors using drones in ways that are dangerous to public health or safety. And I welcome the measures in this bill to do that. But I would urge in conclusion that the Minister should ensure that he has sufficient flexibility through the legislation and its regulations that we're debating today to keep up to date with emerging technology, to ensure small unmanned aircraft or drones can be identified in flight and safely grounded, if necessary, by police, prison, or other relevant security services. And I look forward to supporting the bill this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Video link.